The story begins in the quiet, small American town of Pico Mundo, where a young man named Odd Thomas lives his life. When he was just a young child, his mother suddenly attacked his father with a sharp knife and claimed that she possessed strange, supernatural powers. After that traumatic event, his mother was taken away to a mental hospital. But as Thomas grew up, he discovered that he had inherited the exact same powers because he could clearly see the spirits of the dead. One morning, as Thomas was leaving his house, he met a young girl named Penny who was taking him to meet someone important. Penny was completely silent, yet Thomas kept following her and met his neighbor, Harlow Anderson, who was showing off his brand new car. But the strange thing was that the man couldn't see the girl at all. Then, as soon as Thomas held Penny's hand, the whole terrifying truth was revealed. He saw the girl as a tormented spirit with a badly injured body. She would not find peace until the person responsible for her death was punished. So Thomas decided to teach Harlow a lesson, and when caught, Harlow tried to escape by jumping out of the moving car, but Thomas was not about to let him go. Soon, Harlow ran into a house where a large party was going on, but Thomas caught him and pushed him straight into the deep swimming pool. As soon as they came out of the water, a violent fight broke out between them. But with his impressive fighting skills, Thomas gradually began to overpower Harlow. Meanwhile, the lady of the house came to throw them out, and her son also came to see what was happening. As soon as Harlow saw the boy, he planned to take him hostage and ran straight to the boy's room. But just as he was about to grab the boy, Thomas caught him from behind and attacked him with a heavy vase of flowers. Now the two started punching each other again, but Thomas knocked him to the ground, and just then the police arrived. In the end, Harlow was arrested, and despite all the chaos, Police Chief Wyatt let Thomas go because he was one of the few people who knew about Thomas's secret powers. As Wyatt was leaving, he told Thomas, "I won't be able to hide the truth for much longer." After the ordeal, Penny's spirit came to Thomas again, and this time she had finally found peace. Even though she couldn't speak, she gestured to thank Thomas and then moved on to heaven. A few hours later, Thomas was returning home when he encountered some strange people. They were wearing red uniforms with a bowling ball design on them. Thomas couldn't see their faces, and they all lifted him up asking for help. But suddenly, a mysterious man pulled out a gun and shot everyone, leaving only one survivor who took Thomas to his room. During this, it appeared that Thomas was also shot in the heart. But in reality, all of this was just a vivid premonition. Thomas had gotten used to such visions, so he ignored it and went to work at a restaurant the next morning. There, he met his colleague, a waitress named Viola, and a little while later, his girlfriend Stormy also arrived who, like Officer Wyatt, knew about Thomas's powers. Since childhood, the two had promised to always stay together. His day was going perfectly normal when suddenly Thomas saw some strange creatures enter the restaurant. They are called Bodaks, and ordinary people can't see them, but they can possess humans and kill them in terrifying ways. This time, their target was a strange man in a suit named Fungus Bob. As soon as he left the restaurant, the creatures started following him, and Thomas decided to find out what the Bodaks were planning. After work, Thomas followed them, but Viola called out to him. She said she had a terrifying dream last night that felt completely real. She said that in her dream, she saw herself and many others being killed by a sniper, and they were all wearing red uniforms with a bowling ball design. Hearing this, Thomas remembered his vision from the night before, but he told Viola not to pay too much attention to it. After that, Thomas continued to follow the man in the suit. In fact, he could use his power to easily find people with supernatural energy. Within minutes, he found Fungus Bob returning to his house in a deserted area outside town. And a little while later, when Bob left the house, Thomas quietly snuck in and began to investigate. Inside, he felt a very cold energy coming from one room, and as soon as he crossed the door, he saw a glowing light on the wall like a portal. Without thinking, Thomas put his hand in it, which opened the portal, and he immediately looked for a place to hide. But within seconds, several Bodaks came out of the portal, making it clear that this house was just a front, a place where these creatures came and went. After they left, Thomas continued his search and found a room containing files on the city's most dangerous criminals. There, he also saw a file with Bob's name on it, which contained only a calendar page with the next day's date. This made Thomas suspicious that Bob was planning something big, which is why the Bodaks were so interested in him. As Thomas was analyzing the files, suddenly a man with a weapon knocked on the door, calling for Bob. Thomas escaped through the window but was startled to see two dogs barking on the other side of the fence. He quickly climbed onto the roof so no one would see him. Meanwhile, the mysterious man pointed a gun at the dogs, ordering them to be quiet. As soon as the coast was clear, Thomas left and went straight to Chief Wyatt's house, telling him everything he had discovered. There, he told the chief that Bob should be investigated because he was certain that Bob was involved in a major and evil conspiracy against Pico Mundo. Even though he didn't know the whole story, all the signs pointed to Bob carrying out his plan within 24 hours. Since Thomas's premonitions had always been right, Wyatt believed him and sent one of his officers, Agent Eccles, to investigate Bob. Thomas thanked him and then went to meet Stormy on the church roof. When the place was empty, the two started talking, but then Bob arrived angrily and started moving quickly toward Thomas. Stormy asked, "What's going on?" But Thomas urgently told her to run as fast as she could because the malevolent Bodaks had completely possessed Bob. Luckily, both of them managed to escape through the back door, while Bob kept aggressively trying to break his way out. The two of them fled quickly on a scooter, and on the way, Thomas told Chief Wyatt everything that had happened. Although Wyatt was busy with his wife at the time, he still immediately sent his tactical team. But when the police arrived, all they found was a completely destroyed church. There was no trace or fingerprint of Bob anywhere. Anyway, the chief promised to continue the thorough investigation, and so that the evening wouldn't be totally ruined, Thomas and Stormy went to a local restaurant for dinner. Their date was going quite well when Thomas's friend Ozzy showed up and said he had brought the specific package Thomas had ordered. When Thomas opened the package, he found a necklace with a heavy iron plate attached. He had it specially made for his own protection, because in his dream he had seen himself getting shot directly in the chest. After picking up the package, the two of them started heading back home. But then Thomas felt something strange again and was drawn toward a nearby bowling alley. This made Stormy very anxious because it was a clear sign that Thomas's vision was about to come true. This time, Thomas said that the employees here wear green uniforms, not red, so nothing bad will happen, don't worry. But when they went inside, the uniforms turned out to be bright red. Alarmed, Thomas immediately called Wyatt, who sent his agent Warner there. Within moments, Warner arrived, but he neither liked Thomas nor believed that he had any kind of supernatural power. He started questioning Thomas, so Stormy, using her natural charm, complimented Warner's tattoos. Now, Warner happily started showing off his tattoos. But then, cutting him off, Stormy quickly made an excuse and took Thomas away with her, and the two went home. But Thomas still hadn't found any solid evidence about Bob's real plan. Then Thomas remembered Viola's dream about the bowling alley and decided to go to her house for more information. When he got there, he asked Viola about her dream. Viola began to explain that she had seen bodies all around the bowling alley, with the entire floor covered in blood. Even recalling this vision scared Viola, and now she felt that maybe she would be one of those bodies too. Fearing for her and her daughter's lives, she began to panic. Thomas advised her to take her daughters and leave without telling anyone. Viola agreed and went to get her girls ready. But then Thomas saw more Bodaks entering the house, and to protect Viola's children, he pretended not to see those creatures until Viola and her daughters had safely left the house. After this, Thomas and Stormy started heading back home. Suddenly, they heard someone screaming by the roadside. Thomas immediately went to see what had happened. He saw a girl named Lisette being chased by two aggressive dogs. The girl was running with all her might, but the dogs caught her and attacked her badly. Thomas arrived a little late, and just then a man named Kevin showed up with a gun and shot the dogs. Looking closely, Thomas realized these were the same dogs from Bob's house, and he immediately called the police. As soon as the police arrived, Wyatt ordered his team to find Bob and told them to take Kevin in for questioning. Then he told Thomas and Stormy to go home. But before leaving, Thomas gave his iron-tagged necklace to Wyatt, thinking that the police officer needed it more. A little while later, Thomas dropped Stormy off at her house and returned to his apartment, where he saw a gun lying on the floor. He realized someone had broken into his home, but then he saw Bob's corpse in his bathtub. He had been dead for several hours. It seemed as if he had been deliberately brought there. That's when Thomas realized that during the attack on the church, Bob's spirit had been following him. That's why there were no fingerprints at the scene, and whoever killed Bob was now trying to frame Thomas. In this situation, Thomas knew that even if he called the police, he would be considered the culprit and arrested. So he covered the body with a cloth and decided to take it to an old abandoned factory in town. Meanwhile, Wyatt was spending the evening with his wife when there was a knock at the door. Thinking it was Thomas, he went to open it, but an unknown man shot him several times in the chest and knocked him to the ground. The shooter then fled, and Wyatt's wife immediately called an ambulance. At that time, Thomas had hidden Bob's body in the factory. When he heard about the attack on Wyatt, he rushed to the hospital to see him. Upon arrival, Wyatt's wife hugged him and said, "Today, my husband is alive because of you." Then, showing Thomas the iron-plated necklace, she told him that 2 bullets had been stopped by it, but one had pierced through, and now the doctors were doing everything they could to save Wyatt. At that moment, Thomas realized that people were being killed one by one, and now even his friends were in danger, so he had to quickly figure out what the connection was between all of this, because the date written in Bob's file was for tomorrow. So whatever was going to happen, would happen tomorrow. Now, without Wyatt's help, Thomas decided to take action himself and went back to Bob's house to check out the portal. As soon as he checked the computer there, he found several pages about savage creatures and black magic, which revealed that Bob had been learning black magic, and perhaps that's why the Bodaks had found him. Until now, they had been using him for an even bigger plan. But now that Bob was dead, Thomas couldn't understand what was going to happen next, what the creature's next move would be. That's why he started inspecting the house more thoroughly. As soon as Thomas opened the fridge, he was terrified to see human fingers and a head inside. And just as he closed the door, Bob's ghost appeared right next to him. There was a gunshot wound on his chest, and now he began attacking Thomas. But his spirit couldn't actually harm Thomas. Still, the spirit started throwing all the furniture in the house at Thomas with its power. With great difficulty, Thomas managed to dodge everything and jumped out the window. At that moment, Bob caused the stove to leak gas, and then the whole house exploded. Anyway, Thomas noticed something very strange in all of this. Bob had been shot in the exact same spot where Wyatt was wounded. This convinced him that both had been attacked by the same person. That's why he returned to the old factory to check Bob's body again, and amid the foul stench of decay, he found a distinct tattoo on Bob's skin with the name Pod. Seeing this, Thomas remembered Werner's identical tattoo. He remembered that the acronym PODI stood for the Prince of Darkness. It was a group of people who worshipped the devil. Now that he had found another important clue, Thomas set out to find Werner. But just then, his mysterious powers pulled him straight towards the mall, where Stormy worked at the ice cream shop. Sensing danger to his girlfriend, Thomas rushed into the mall, grabbed a baseball bat along the way, and headed toward the security room. As soon as he reached the control room, a masked man with a gun tried to escape, but Thomas struck him hard on the head, knocking him down. When he removed the mask, he discovered that it was Wyatt's agent Eccles, who was apparently working with their enemies in this whole plan. As soon as Thomas touched his gun, he saw visions of the past. Now it became clear to him that this was the same person who had shot the police chief, and that he had planned all of this together with Werner and Bob. It was also revealed that these three were about to launch a massive attack on the small town to please the devil. They had no idea that in reality, all three of them were acting according to Bodak's will, whose sole purpose is to gather in the human world and kill as many people as possible. But when Thomas started chasing Bob, that same police officer killed Bob so that he couldn't reveal any more of their plans and secrets. Liz lost her life because she was Eccles' girlfriend and had seen photos related to this attack. For this reason, the police officer hit her hard and knocked her unconscious, and then Werner sent Bob's dogs to finish her off. Now the biggest question was, where was this attack going to happen and how could it be stopped? That's why Thomas set out to find Werner, but before that, he thought to warn Stormy. Just then, he saw some employees from the bowling alley coming to the mall for lunch, and at the same time, Viola also arrived there with her daughters. She told Thomas that she had come back because nothing strange had happened after that. Putting all these things together, Thomas realized a horrifying truth. Now the attack was going to happen inside the mall. Without wasting a single second, he told Viola and her daughters to get out of there right away and set off himself to find Werner. Suddenly, a large portal opened in the ceiling from which a terrifying swarm of dozens of Bodaks emerged and spread throughout the mall to witness the impending attack. Moments later, Thomas heard a woman scream saying that an armed man was attacking everyone. Panic-stricken people started running towards the exit. But at that moment, a mechanism in the security room was activated and all the doors were instantly locked. Then, another masked man pulled out a gun and started shooting indiscriminately everywhere, including at Stormy's ice cream shop. Thinking it was Werner, Thomas grabbed Eccles' gun and ran towards the shooter. There were only 4 bullets in that gun. The first 2 shots missed, but the third bullet hit the shooter in the shoulder. Meanwhile, the Bodaks started gathering around Thomas to stop him, but even then, he didn't stop. As soon as he got right in front of the shooter, Thomas took direct aim and finished him off. After that, thinking about Stormy, he ran toward the ice cream shop. That's when he saw Stormy, who was perfectly fine. Seeing her safe and sound brought Thomas great relief. But just then, List's spirit appeared before him, and like Penny, she couldn't speak either. But Thomas understood that this wasn't over yet. He went to see who the masked shooter was, and instead of Werner, he found Kevin. It was the same man who had killed the dogs and had broken into Bob's house just a few days earlier. Then, Thomas followed List's spirit, which led him out to the parking lot where a large truck was parked. Its cargo door was securely locked, so Thomas asked a mall employee nearby for help. Together, they used a saw to cut the lock and open the truck's door, where they found several fuel barrels and, among them, a time bomb. Then the employee quickly tried to get everyone out of there. But just then, Werner appeared and shot at the man with his pistol. At that very moment, Thomas immediately ran to close the door and rushed toward the truck's cabin. But Werner kept firing and 1 bullet grazed him. Still, despite being injured, Thomas got inside the vehicle and sped away from the goods. But Werner didn't give up and fired at the windshield, hitting Thomas in the shoulder. Now Thomas's blood started flowing rapidly, but there was no time to waste, so he began driving the vehicle away from the city at high speed. Meanwhile, Werner, hanging from the door under the control of a Bodaks, reached the window and pointed his gun directly at Thomas, but Thomas narrowly escaped the shot. Then Werner desperately tried to open the door and get inside the cabin, but at that exact moment, Thomas jumped from the moving truck onto the hard road. Werner tried to stop the truck, but the vehicle broke through a bridge railing and fell down into the depths, causing the bomb to explode and killing both Werner and his companion instantly. Now Thomas collapsed unconscious on the ground right there. In the end, he had managed to save the ordinary people from dying. Then, a few hours later, he regained consciousness on a hospital bed, where Stormy was very happy to see him safe and sound. A little while later, Wyatt's wife arrived there and asked the nurse to treat his wounds. Then, gradually, Thomas's condition improved and now he had become a hero throughout the entire area. A crowd gathered outside the hospital, and after the investigation was completed, Werner, Eccles and Bob were held responsible for Liz's death and for attempting to attack inside the mall. The next day, Thomas returned from the hospital to Stormy's house. Now, Thomas just wanted to spend some peaceful moments with Stormy without paying attention to anything else. Then, a few days later, Chief Wyatt came to visit him with his wife and Viola and told him that he had stayed at Stormy's house long enough and now he should go back to his own home. But Thomas asked, "What's the problem?" Then Wyatt revealed a painful truth. All this time, Thomas had actually been alone in that house. In reality, Stormy had died during the mall attacks. What he was seeing now was just a spirit who, because of her connection to Thomas, was unable to move on to the other world. Thomas explained that he had realized this truth the very moment he saw her getting up from the counter, but he simply wasn't ready to accept that he had lost the love of his life. Still, Wyatt tried to make him understand that he had to let Stormy go because this world was no longer meant for her. In the end, Thomas accepted what he said, and the two shared one last kiss. Even though Stormy's voice could no longer be heard, she still expressed her love for Thomas, and Thomas also said that he would find her again so they could fulfill their promise to always be together. Happy with this, Stormy left, and her soul transformed into butterflies, dissolving into the air.